Thank you so much for the organizers for having us for what has really been a truly great and interesting session so far, or set of sessions actually. So the title of our talk, which is a co-production, as Niels just said, of Thomas Volker and myself, is DataFictions, or How Measurements and Predictive Analytics Rule Imagined Future Worlds. And we would like to start off by giving you a bit of context. As many of you may know, there is currently a lot of hype about the techniques such as data mining, predictive analytics, or smart algorithms. The umbrella term that is often used in this context is that of big data. If one examines recent policy documents, one can find many hopes and promises about the ongoing data deluge. In essence, big data is said to be the next industrial revolution, a key asset, the new oil, gold, game-changing and transformative. It is supposed to be the cornerstone of a new data-driven economy, generating value, increasing productivity, and boosting growth. It is also meant to transform and improve public service and administration by increasing government efficiency and creating new and better services. Ultimately, big data is expected to support evidence-informed policymaking by enabling real-time feedback, generating solutions, and predicting the future. So as you can see, there is a fair amount of buzz around. From an epistemological perspective, one could argue that this growing interest in big data reflects a certain political need for what Destin and Gallison have called mechanical objectivity, meaning the idea of a machine-driven science that captures nature with as little human interference as possible. As Theodore Porter has argued, this drive for impersonal knowledge is reinforced by people's trust in numbers, which in turn boosts the formation of new centers of calculation and Latourian notion and anticipatory regimes, featuring a particular style of reasoning that Rob Kitching has labeled new empiricism. It might not come as a surprise that the social sciences and the humanities have been quite critical of the hyperbolic expectations often associated with big data. Scholars have disputed many of the epistemological claims of this new empiricism. They've warned of the potential dangers of increasingly data-fied societies and pointed to issues of privacy and surveillance, as well as matters of bias and discrimination. NGOs and civil societies too have voiced their concerns, and films such as Citizen 4 on Edward Snowden and the NSA spying scandal have attracted a substantial audience. So what we are currently presented with is a climate of clash with a very positive, promissory discourse on the one hand and a very negative, pessimistic one on the other. And while this is certainly a complex issue, we think that one reason for this ongoing controversy lies in the ambiguity and vagueness of the term big data and the vast range of social, technological, and scientific developments subsumed under the label. However, we believe that two steps could be taken to alleviate this problem and improve upon the current state of affairs. For starters, we would like to suggest a shift from debates about big data to discussions about concrete big data applications. Such a reorientation might allow for a more grounded debate that deals with specifics rather than generalities. But this alone is not enough. In a second step, one should attempt to contextualize these applications by considering their real-world consequences. Unfortunately, in the case of big data, as is true with many other emerging technologies, such a reflexive engagement is difficult to achieve as the field is still evolving, new uses and applications continue to emerge, and long-term societal effects thus remain difficult to grasp. This is one aspect of the so-called Collingridge dilemma, which claims that impacts cannot be easily predicted until a technology is extensively developed and widely used. And this is where we think that science fiction might play a vital role. However, before we can talk about why we think that science fiction can be a valuable addition to debates about big data, it is necessary to take a minute and talk about what we actually mean by the term. There have been many debates about the true nature of science fiction, about the boundaries of the genre, the significance and relationship between science on the one hand and fiction on the other, and about different terminologies. For example, there is this distinction between hard science fiction, which is characterized by an emphasis on scientific accuracy and technical detail, and soft science fiction, which is usually defined as a subgenre where realism and plausibility is a lot less central. As a result, soft sci-fi is sometimes attributed to the domain of fantasy rather than science fiction. Just think of the frequent debates and comparisons between Star Trek and Star Wars. And as you maybe can imagine, with respect to this distinction, a steampunk dragon, such as the one in the picture, might pose severe conceptual problems. However, while such a discussion might be illuminating on a conceptual level, we are less interested in what science fiction is than in what it has to offer for the analysis of new and emerging technologies. In this regard, we would like to argue, following Margaret Atwood, that science fiction presents us with imagined other worlds located somewhere apart from our everyday ones. And we think that this emphasis here should really be on the notion of other worlds, which stresses the idea that science fiction is not primarily about novel technologies or scientific discoveries, but about the potential effects and consequences such innovations may have on a society. Thus, following Isaac Asimov, science fiction can be said to be that branch of literature which is concerned with the impact of scientific advance upon human beings. And it is exactly in this sense that we think that science fiction can stimulate critical reflection on socio-technical innovations and can also be an important addition to policymaking. While policy usually follows a promissory logic and focuses on what is desirable, science fiction creates thick narratives that embed technologies within a complex and coherent other world or other worlds, which by pointing to the possible implications of techno-scientific advancement can be used as a means for both engagement and intervention. And what we would like to present in the following are some early and very preliminary results of our assessment of science fiction literature that we think is relevant to current debates about big data. As you will see, we incorporated both older and more recent material, and we also tried to retain a broad view examining novels, short stories, movies, and TV shows. And the first example we would like to give is one of the big classics, right? George Orwell's 1984, written in the late 1940s, which presents us with a totalitarian world in which most personal and individual freedoms have been abolished. The power of the one remaining political party goes unchallenged, and individuals find themselves under constant surveillance through telescreens, microphones, the thought police, co-workers, their own neighbors, and as well as the kids. Orwell depicts a world in which privacy, or own life, as it is called in the book, is no longer feasible. And the Foucauldian panopticon, you never know whether someone is watching or not, penetrates large parts of society. Against the backdrop of extensive state surveillance, programs such as PRISM or Stellar Wind and the Snowden revelations, it might not come as a surprise that there have been many comparisons between present intelligence efforts and Orwell's 1984. But while we think that Orwellian society serves as an important reminder of the value of privacy and the pitfalls of government agencies moving beyond public accountability, we also believe that the book cannot quite cover some of the more recent developments that go along with an increasingly digitalized society. And this is where Dave Egger's recent novel, The Circle, comes into view. The topic of this book is also surveillance, the loss of privacy, and the need for complete personal transparency. However, there are a few significant differences. Instead of a nosy government, we're now confronted with a very powerful, opaque internet corporation that starts to dominate vast portions of the internet, including services such as search, social networking, instant messaging, and so forth. Think of Google, think of Facebook, think of Twitter, but all in one. This corporation is very data hungry, but it does not need to spy, as the users provide them with their data willingly just by using their services. So what we can see here is the enactment of a very different power structure, a very different kind of surveillance. Personal data is no longer taken, it is offered. But there are a few drawbacks, right? Well, the social sharing of information starts as a voluntary practice. It soon becomes a necessity in order to stay connected and relevant. Anonymity is no longer an option. All secrets have to be revealed, and no record can ever be erased. At the same time, the company becomes more and more powerful, not only in a market, but also in a political realm, with substantial influence on policy making. To use a quote from José López, Egger's book appears to be work that works well as a dramatic device for exploring the present. In the past few years, we have all witnessed the birth and growth of giant internet companies and observed some of the effects of widespread digital communication. In that sense, novels such as The Circle might help to stimulate critical thinking and encourage debate. Another classic that deals with issues of surveillance, but with a special twist, is Philip K. Dick's short story Minority Report. On the left side of the like the book is in the middle, and on the left side there are just scenes from the movie. Here, surveillance happens in the form of predictive policing. An agency called Pre-Crime uses mutants and analytical machinery to foresee future crimes and detain would-be criminals before they can ever commit a felony. Well, this might, at first, seem far-fetched. Predictive policing through data mining techniques is already happening in police departments around the world. In essence, algorithms are used to forecast the probability of future crime scenes, which then allows police forces to focus on particular areas. But this is not all. There have been reports that officials also use predictive analytics to single out individuals who are more likely to be involved in violent crimes. Maybe because they have a criminal record, maybe because their friends have a criminal record, or maybe because they just live in a wrong neighborhood. And what already has happened is that officers would show up unannounced and at people's homes, warning them to obey the law or face the consequences. And this then is already quite close to what we are presented with in Minority Report. Prediction in general features prominently in science fiction. Maybe just a few more examples. In Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, a mathematician named Harry Seldon invents a science called psychohistory to predict and shape the future of a galactic civilization consisting of millions of planets. In Dan Simmons' Hyperion, we are introduced to the Technocore, an artificial intelligence which serves and advises humanity through its predictive abilities before eventually becoming an independent entity with its own goals and plans. In the recent movie Captain America: The Winter Soldier, the counterterrorism agency SHIELD develops Project Insight, a system of satellite-linked helicarriers on the left picture, right, with long-range precision guns designed to, and I quote, neutralize a lot of threats before they have even happened. When Captain America confronts SHIELD director Nick Fury by saying, "I thought the punishment usually came after the crime," Fury replies with a stern face, "We can't afford to wait that long." But science fiction ideas for reflective engagement with big data applications go far beyond issues of surveillance and prediction. In The Affinities, Robert Charles Wilson tells a story of what might happen if matching algorithms, such as we know them from internet dating platforms such as OkCupid, were used to create social groups of like-minded people with similar social traits. So not only for finding a partner, but large-scale social groups, right? In Tomorrow and Tomorrow, we are thrown into a world where most people wear implants that continuously project context-sensitive pop-ups into the field of vision. Think of hardwired Google glasses that continuously would basically show you advertisement, right? That's about it. It's mostly about advertisement. Finally, in the 1964 novel Simulacrum 3, constant opinion polling for both economic and political purposes becomes such a nuisance that a group of engineers and scientists decides to build a simulation with the aim of probing artificial avatars for the necessary feedback. So instead of being probed themselves, the avatars should be the ones being probed. When we think of recent advances in market and opinion research, for example, personalized ads or voter targeting, this classic science fiction novel suddenly seems surprisingly relevant. Conclusions. When you think about the examples that I just presented, big data is usually not mentioned by name. Instead, science fiction stories confront us with concrete applications that are contextualized in rich narratives and invite us to critically reflect on the potential consequences of computerization and digitalization. This contextualization allows for more nuanced debates that deals with specifics rather than generalities. Thus, we argue that science fiction can be a valuable addition to current debates, complementing the promissory logic of policy reports with more focused and detailed depictions of other worlds. However, and this is the last point, when using science fiction metaphors, we must be very prudent. For example, relying on Orwell's 1984 alone, as very often happens, this just does not cover the range of issues at hand. It might lead to problematic narrowing down of the perspective. Yet, rather than refraining from using science fiction metaphors, we should seek to broaden our scope and search for further examples, meaning more, not less, science fiction. Thank you.